Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to everybody joining us on our weekly Learn in Your Lunchtime webinar. Absolutely super to have you joining us. And we'd really love it if you could just pop a note in the chat, say hi, tell us where you're from, what you'd like to learn about in this session today. And as I always remind you, we've made it through to Friday afternoon. So although it was a short week, it still feels like a long week. I think it's just that time of year. Hey, Tash?
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, glad it's Friday.
Absolutely, glad it's Friday, officially the weekend. So guys, as you can see, we've got Natasha with us in studio today, and we're going to be talking about informational interviews, and we'll be asking Natasha a little bit about that and how you can use that as a strategy for your job search and career growth and getting into the companies that you want to join and getting the jobs that you want, etc. So really looking forward to that. And then just to mention that next week, myself and Tracy have launched a new course this week on how to interview for a sales position. So we'll be joined with by our co-instructor in that course, Salil, and we'll be doing a webinar next week on how to interview for a sales position. So if any of you guys out there looking to get into sales positions in organizations, in that course we teach you how to get those roles and how to be successful in a sales interview. All right, so Natasha, do you want to tee us up today and just tell us what we're talking about and what an informational interview is, and maybe just some context for why this is important for people to understand and start thinking about?
Yeah, so thank you. Thank you so much for having me join again, Peter. And so I mean, informational interviews, there's loads of information. So if you go and read up on it, there's lots of information about what it's about. But essentially, it's an informal conversation with someone that is working in a career, industry, organization that you are interested in learning more about. So I think, I mean, like you mentioned before, informational interviews are not about getting a job. I think, as the name has said, it is about being able to get information. And I actually read a Harvard Business Review article this week, which I found particularly interesting. So the author, Sean O'Keefe, he had mentioned that in his years of working with young people, he's actually found that taking out the word interview altogether seems to work really well. And he prefers to actually call them career conversations, which I actually like, because sometimes when you hear the word interview, it can be quite daunting for the student. Sometimes the person that you're interviewing, may be really busy with their day-to-day stuff, and they go like, oh, I don't know if I really have time for this. So I really like what he's put forward and suggested is that let's call it career conversations, because that's actually what it really is, an informal conversation with somebody in a field, industry, organization that you want to connect with to learn more about that particular environment or position, etc. So you asked, why are they important? And I also do want to mention upfront that sometimes we have this misconception that informational interviews are conducted when preparing for an interview or when considering a career transition, but actually it is a regular practice and skill that we should actually hone, because it's something that we will use throughout our careers. It is an important part of career exploration, and it doesn't only fit into kind of the job search stage of one's career. I mean, even if you find that you're quite settled, it's always useful to be engaging and learning more about the industry, connecting with others to be expanding your network. So yeah, I hope that provides some context around what we'll be discussing today. And I'd like to actually call it career conversations, because I actually think it just makes the concept more accessible and digestible.
Yeah, that's great, Natasha. I love what you were saying there about just doing research. And we've heard previously from Tracy talking about that being an important part of preparation for the more formal interview. And I think, as you call it, those career conversations, whether it's with mentors or contacts in your network, all just building up and increasing your level of confidence, I think, for when you do go and sit down opposite that interviewer. So, and I mean, this is a service also that you offer. And how you coach, people to go out there and, just to get ready for interviews, etc. So, I mean, Natasha, if somebody was to sit down with you and say, look, I've got an interview at a company next week type of thing, and you coach them to go and research and have some career conversations, etc., what are those practical steps and sort of techniques that they should be thinking about to take that action? And
I think we've had a bit of a break in. Sorry, Peter. I don't know if we had a bit of a what is it, like a technical glitch. I missed part of that conversation or part of that question.
No, all good, Natasha. I was just saying, so if somebody came to you and said, look, coach me and help me, I've got an interview next week, the formal step, in the process, and you said, look, you need to go and have some career conversations, you need to research and get ready for this interview, practically what would that look like for somebody, and what would that action, need to kind of translate into in the steps that they take? And if somebody's got interviews coming up in the next few weeks, how can we help the people listening in today also take the same action to get ready for their interviews?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's actually kind of 3 stages to this process, if I could put it that way, right? There's kind of the pre-conversation prep. There's then having the actual conversation, and then there's a bit of a debrief of the process. So, if somebody had to reach out to say, look, I've got this interview next week, if time permits, it's always advisable to try and connect with someone in the organization to have this career conversation. And I think much like Tracy actually shares, prior to even landing an interview, part of researching an industry, part of researching an organization is actually building up your database of networks that you can reach out to, so that when you do have an interview, you can get in touch with that person to say, I've landed an interview, I'd love to just have 10 or 15 minutes of your time to talk through a couple of things that will help me prepare. So coming back to those 3 stages, right? The pre-conversation prep firstly involves doing some research. So whether it's researching an organization or researching the role, it is really important to be able to do some research on the industry, if it's an interview, the organization, as well as the role, because I think engaging that professional, you want to go in prepared. So, I mean, like, as much as we've said that it's an informal conversation, it's a casual conversation, you don't want to skip the research and the preparation, and you don't want to go in asking that professional stuff that you could easily Google, because it's really then just a waste of their time. So first step is do your research. And I think I'm becoming synonymous with the word research, because it's something that I say to clients all the time. You need to be doing research. So almost consider yourself sort of like a bit of a field researcher, right? So research the organization, what it is they do, research the role, so that when you are sitting in front of this person, you're asking credible questions. Whether you've got a relationship with this person or you're actually engaging with them for the first time, you want to create that sense that you are a credible professional. You haven't just kind of walked in there unprepared and wasted their time. So research. The second piece then is actually preparing sample questions and developing an introduction of yourself. And I know this might sound a little bit like, well, why must I do that? But I think, when you have a conversation with that person, you want to be able to explain a little bit about your background. Why is it that you're reaching out? So that's really important, to be able to develop that introduction about yourself. And you don't want to use 5 minutes of the time that you've been allocated to interview the person talking about yourself. So you want to have something that is succinct, something that is prepared, so that you can provide a bit of context as to who you are, what you're studying, where you're studying, why you're reaching out, and how you want to make the most of their time. So research. Secondly, prepare your introduction and come up with some sample questions. But Peter, there's actually a step before that, right? So if you're going in a little bit blind, you haven't made contact before, there's also some really key steps around initiating that contact. And I know, students often say like, oh, I don't know how to really do this. It's a bit awkward. Like, should I just email someone that I don't know? Or should I just send a message to someone on LinkedIn that I don't know? What's the likelihood that they're going to respond? And my advice is it's always best to start out with your network. So speak to family, speak to friends, even if they're not in that career field that to connect you with people who are. So it's always good to kind of first start out with your network. And I think sometimes when people actually sit down and write down the people they know and start to expand on that, it's quite amazing how many people you do actually know, whether it's family, friends. If you're a student, it could be alumni that are now working in organizations that are of interest to you, tutors, teaching assistants, professors. Tap into those resources and networks that you actually do know, because I think it's always easier if you can reach out to an alum, or you can say, my professor at UP or whatever passed on your contact details, or maybe that professor helps you and does an introduction, so you've got a bit of an in. It is hard kind of going in a bit cold, and I think just because people are so busy, it's not always, you may not always get that desirable response if you're going in cold. So make most of the resources that you've got and the networks that you've got to help you get started.
No, that's great, Natasha. I think there were some very practical steps there. So, make sure you've got that sort of elevator pitch. And I mean, that's actually the assignment that we give people, that the course that Tracy and I teach about how to interview like a boss. So if you go in there and do that course, the assignment there is exactly as Natasha has indicated. Write out that sort of description for yourself. You there, Natasha?
I am. I think, I don't know we've got some gremlins. We've got some gremlins in the background today.
So I was just saying, write your elevator pitch and do that as part of the assignment of our Interview Like a Boss course that Tracy and I teach. So practical steps there. And then the other one that you made was make the list of people that you can approach. And what I was also going to add to that, as you were saying, you'd be surprised about how many people you know or how many people you've actually got access to. And that's one of the big things we're trying to achieve with the Student Success Coach community. So I put the link to the Facebook group there, and you can come in there. And I think we've got now 2,300 people in that group, and anybody can post in there. So you can say, guys, I've got an interview with somebody at Sasol next week. Does anybody have information about Sasol, or would anybody connect me with somebody at Sasol so I can find more about the culture and the organization, etc., to help do your research, etc. So that's, I think, a community resource that people can access to increase their network as part of the preparation that you were talking about for that career conversation there. Okay, so Natasha, a bit of preparation, making a list, writing your elevator pitch, jotting down some questions, etc. So now, hopefully that person's, they've connected with you and they've set up some time and it's all scheduled. The technology works. So like you go into that career conversation, Tash, what does that look like then? I mean, so as you were saying, make sure you're well prepared so you don't fumble at the beginning, etc. But and that hour is going to go quite quickly. What does success look like in terms of going through that career conversation?
Yeah, so I mean, I think now with people working remotely a lot of the time, sometimes those conversations tend to happen either on the phone or via, kind of an online conferencing platform like Zoom or Google Meets or sometimes Microsoft Teams. So that is why it is really important. I think sometimes beforehand, just if you're going to be doing it online, to play around with the platform to make sure that you're comfortable. But why I also say before you even make contact, that it's really important to prepare your, like you said, your elevator speech and to have some questions ready, is if you're going to pick up the phone and maybe try and reach someone. I've had a client share with me that they made a call trying to just introduce themselves and ask the person if they had some time. And the person said, sure, I've actually got some time this afternoon. Otherwise, I'm not going to be available for the next 2 or 3 weeks. So if now works for you, let's go. And thankfully, the said client had prepared, but it is always important to prepare before, to prepare your introduction beforehand and to have your sample questions available. So now you are either sitting in front of the person in person, or you're doing a telephonic interview, or you're doing something via Zoom. There's a couple of things that you really want to do, right? First is setting the tone, if we can call it that, or setting the stage for the conversation. So at the beginning of the interview, you want to establish your relationship with the professional that you're interviewing by just mentioning kind of how you got in contact. So it might be Professor so-and-so introduced us, or, I'm also an alum of the University of Stellenbosch, or whatever the case might be. So I think it's always important to kind of establish your relationship. Then you want to introduce yourself. So I'm a second-year student at the university of whatever. I'm majoring in this. I reached out to you because I saw on your LinkedIn profile that you're currently a graduate at ABC company. I'm really interested in learning all I can about this particular profession, and I'd love to be able to ask you a couple of questions. So you want to set the stage, set the context for the meeting. You also want to stay upfront. So the other thing about informational interviews is that you want to interview a number of people to be able to get a more generalized view of the profession or the organization. So you want to say upfront that you're interested in talking to other professionals or other experts. And why I say this is because if you've put that out there upfront at the start of the conversation, you've already planted the seed in the person's mind that you're looking for additional sources, and they may, whilst you're having this conversation, start to think of other people. Sometimes if you wait right until the end, because a lot of people tend to ask the question at the end, are there others that you can refer me to? And sometimes that professional may be caught off guard, but if you've planted the seed up front, if you do ask the question at the end, say, like I mentioned, I'm interested in speaking to a couple of other professionals. Is there anyone you can refer me to? They've already got a couple of people in mind. So establish the relationship, introduce yourself nice and strong, mention that you're interested in speaking to other people, and then I like to mention something about time constraints, or just to frame how long you're going to be having the conversation, just because people are really busy. So generally speaking, informational interviews are around anything between 15 and 30 minutes. And that doesn't sound like a long time, but this is why it's also important to be able to go in prepared, so that you don't waste the person's time. So you don't want to say something like, this conversation shouldn't take longer than 20 minutes, so that the person also knows how long they can be expected to give you their time. And if you find at the end of those 20 minutes you're having a really good conversation and it seems like the person is interested in engaging longer, you do want to say something along the lines of, I want to respect your time. We did say 20 minutes. I'd love to keep talking to you, but if you do need to go, I understand, and perhaps we can pick up the conversation if you feel that it's the conversation is progressing and the person's keen to give you their time. So you're in the conversation, setting the tone is the first piece, and then you really just go in with the questions that you've prepared. So like I said, Peter, people can go on, research this concept of informational interviews. There's going to be loads of questions that you can find. And I also think when you do your research up front about the industry or the profession or the organization, that will also help you to build up your list of questions It will also help you to be au fait with jargon that is specific to that particular industry or trends that are going on in the industry. So, I mean, sample questions and usual questions that you would ask in a career conversation or informational interview is, something along the line of, what does a typical day or week look like for you? So the important thing around this is, like I said, you don't want to ask questions to which you can just find the answers on Google. You want to get some inside information about that organization or about that industry. So, what does a typical day or week look like for you? What do you enjoy the most about the work that you do? What do you enjoy the least about the work that you do? You could ask the person questions around, could they walk you through their career path, starting out from when they graduated or when they left school to kind of where they are now? You want to get stuff that you're not going to find on the internet. You could even say to someone, at this particular organization, what courses or certifications are or could you differentiate for me, like between the courses that are desirable and those courses that are like indispensable? So what's going to make stuff stand out on your resume or stand out in your interview? So those are some of the things you'd want to get. If you're in a field where you're going to be using a lot of technology, you might want to ask them, like, what types of technology do you use in this particular organization? So look, there's loads of questions, but my advice is go research, come up with your sample. You don't want to have like 50 questions. So I would say a list of 10 questions is sufficient. And I think also coming out of the pandemic, there could be questions related to, well, how was COVID-19 shaped work in this particular organization, or how have you experienced it in terms of shaping the industry? How have your responsibilities shifted, or how has perhaps working remotely benefited your capability of being able to complete tasks, etc. So those could also be really relevant questions to ask.
No, that's great, Natasha. Thank you very much for that. And just anybody listening to the podcast after this live webinar interview, Louise has got a question up on screen, which Natasha has pretty much already answered, saying, do you recommend certain questions in these kind of informational interviews or career conversations? And if I could just give my perspective on that, in that list of questions, you could also be as bold as to discuss the job that you're going for in the interview, and then actually maybe even the interviewer, if you're aware of that person, and ask this person that you're meeting with what you think they are looking for in that role and that job that they're now obviously conducting interviews for. And that will really help you direct your efforts in that formal interview to position yourself according to the expectations of the interviewer. They may not know and they may have to guess, but it's going to be additional information, like you say, Natasha, that they won't find on the job spec and they won't find on Google, because that person, if you've chosen them well, has got some level of unique insight about the industry or the company, or even the interviewer to some degree. And look, they may not want to share everything, but you could get some useful hints and tips. So, for me, in all the job interviews that I've ever gone for, I've always tried to get into the mind of the interviewer, and that person sitting on the other side of the table. How can I position myself as best for them? What are they looking for? They're there, they want the best person for the job. It's a transaction that you want to do, close the deal, get the job and get cracking with your career type of thing. So I almost, maybe in the good investment banking tradition, sort of want to just get the deal done. What's it going to take to do it? You know what I mean? And it's almost like that the sort of golf course conversation to say, right, what's it going to take for me to close this deal and get this thing sorted? I want this job, I want this career. And this person helping you would not have given their time to you if they weren't willing to help you. So take advantage of that. And I think, Natasha, you made a valuable point earlier on, and something that I always make available in the Facebook group is that I'm happy to have a 30-minute conversation with anybody on anything that you think I can help you with. And I do that for free because it helps me research my courses, my webinars. It helps keep me relevant to what people are wanting. If you want to spend time with Natasha or Tracy, this is their full-time jobs, so you will need to invest in their consulting services, and I put their websites up on the chat there for you. But for myself, doing this, as a side hustle and just helping to create and get this community going, very often I'm exactly like what you said, Natasha. Somebody will DM me in Facebook or get hold of me and say, Pete, need some help, whatever. I'm actually like, listen, I've got 30 minutes now. It's on my mind, because if we schedule it for the diary next week, I'm probably going to forget about it. And you've got a real issue, so let's hop on the phone and deal with it right now. Yeah. And that sometimes catches people by surprise. But, I then coach them through their own issue and help them resolve it. If it's preparing for an interview, like we've been talking about this afternoon, if I know something about the industry and if I know something about the role, then I'll help them or you, if you want help, anybody on this webinar today. And really all with the goal of getting people to be successful students or graduates or job seekers, etc. So Natasha, I think that was a very good comprehensive overview and response there to Louise's question about recommended questions. So I'm just going to see if there are any other questions here. Cindy says, is it too forward to ask how can someone grow within the company on the first interview, or do you leave this question for the subsequent interviews or when you get into the company organization? Okay, so Cindy, the first point I would make is that, look, today is really focused on the stages before the formal interview. So what Natasha's talking about, and maybe you didn't pick up at the beginning, but these are conversations with people in your network and are not necessarily the actual interview. But I think, Natasha, let's see if we can answer Cindy's question for, in the context of the actual formal interview, please.
Yeah, so I don't think there's anything wrong with asking this question. You could say something along the lines of, what are some of the growth prospects? What do some of the growth prospects look like in this particular role? For example, I guess it depends on what if you're invested or interested in future training and development opportunities, you could ask something along those lines of what are some of the learning and development opportunities available within this organization. But this is also why it is important to be able to do these informational interviews, because a question like this is such a great question to ask someone when you have the opportunity to have a career conversation with them. And when you've asked them, tell me a little bit about your career path. Now that you've learned a little bit about my background, what courses do you advise that I look into? Are there journals or articles that you think I should be subscribing to, etc.? This really gives you a good idea of how you can grow to make yourself look to make yourself an attractive candidate in the market. But interviews aside, if you are wanting to make a career transition, or you're a scholar at school, just doing some research in terms of choices of study after school, these are really important conversations to be having with people who've kind of been there, done that.
Yeah, that's great, Natasha. Thank you. And Cindy, if I could add my perspective, I always think that an interview is as much for them to assess you as it is for you to assess them. And we teach this in our interviews course, but they will say to you, do you have any questions for us? Yeah. And so you could ask it at that point, or you could ask it in terms of how you would relate your answers to their questions in the context of the sort of learning and development culture of the organization. That might be useful for you in answering their questions. But certainly you must not ever feel like you shouldn't ask questions to assess the company as whether it is one that you want to work for. Obviously, they'd need to make you an offer before you could even consider it. But presuming you get multiple offers, they would need to be well positioned for you to accept their offer. So Cindy, I think, you should be confident in that process. And Tracy, thank you. Just, absolutely there. If you ask one question or five, get the information you need, not for the sake of it, because you feel you should ask a question. So whether it's formal interviews or these career conversations beforehand, helping you to prepare for interviews, just be a little selfish, be confident, be assertive, manage your career, manage your student success, take ownership of it. No one else is going to do it for you. And that's why these webinars and the student success coach community and Tracy's services and Natasha's services are all here, but you have to take action. You have to manage your process. You have to say, I want to get this degree. I want to get this job. I want to be successful. And we've interviewed and talked to many people on this webinar and in our community that give you examples and patterns and ways of doing that. But it is still ultimately up to you to manage your time as best as possible and physically do these things and make it happen. Okay, Natasha, great conversation so far. I don't see other questions coming through from the chat. Any other points of advice more generally then, Natasha? We've got informational interviews. We've spoken about that. Anything else relating to those conversations or more generally, for formal job interviews?
Yeah, so I mean, there's so many benefits to conducting career conversations or having exploratory coffee chats, which is what we like to call them. In corporate, is set up a coffee chat with someone in the business where you'd like to get more information. There are so many benefits, right? And apart from the formal job interview that you are preparing for, I like to think of it as kind of play the end game, if I could call it that, in that it's not just about getting information for the interview, but there are benefits in that you're getting insider information and tips. So some of that stuff that you're not going to find on a company's website or online when you Google. There's stuff about exposure, right? So if you are doing this before you've actually landed an interview, if you're engaging with a couple of people within that organization or within that industry, your name is going to be top of mind. And this is one of the ways to access what we call the hidden job market, is that if you've engaged with people in the organization, maybe there's not a role now. And like you've said, I'm not contacting you because I want a job, but I'm contacting you because I want information. You've prepared, you've made a good impression. When a role does come available, that person or those people that you've connected with in that organization or in that industry are going to remember you. And why I also say it's about playing the end game, it is about, especially for a student, starting to build and expand your professional network. So, we spoke about the pre-interview stuff. We spoke about the actual interview. There's a lot to be said about the debrief or the post-interview follow-up. So when you've actually had an opportunity to connect with that professional, there's a couple of things that I always suggest one does. Firstly, send a thank you note, because it is important to acknowledge that that person has given up some of their time to speak to you. Follow up with them. If they offered you really useful advice, you tried it out, and whether there was a positive outcome or a negative outcome, you could say, like, thank you for that advice. I tried it out. I found this a bit challenging. Or, you know what, like, thank you so much. It really worked. And this was the outcome. I think the person who's given you their time, it also just makes them feel good in that they were useful or they were helpful. And there's nothing, so there's something to be said about following up, but you could also just keep in touch with that person. Based on that conversation that we had, I actually did some further research and I came across a really interesting article that I thought you might find really useful. So this is just a way of maintaining that network. So there are so many benefits to being able to access the hidden job market, getting exposure. You also mentioned something at the start of our conversation, Peter, about just building up your self-confidence, because I do think as a student, just starting to build that professional network, having these conversations also just makes you more confident. It improves and enhances your listening and conversational skills, so that when you're actually having that formal job interview, you've had some practice to engage and network with professionals in that industry that you're interested in.
Brilliant, Natasha, thank you. And I think just, as we've mentioned previously on webinars, using tools like LinkedIn to support that networking and accessing that hidden job market is such a powerful platform that, as you build up your self-confidence, so you should build up your profile on LinkedIn and continue to manage that and maintain it and use it to network with people and see it as, a digital channel, if you like, for efficiently accessing that network and getting access to people and experts and information that help you manage your career as best as you possibly can. Got a great question here from Arlen, zoology honors student at University of Pretoria. what are some key points that may help with an interview with someone whose home language, e.g. French, is not the same as your own?
So, I mean, if there's going to be an extreme language barrier, you'd almost want to get that out the way when you're first engaging with the person. So if you're sending them an email, I'm not sure how you would communicate with them. But if it's something that you're conscious about, I would actually just put it out there up front, right? In that, French is my home language, or I'm quite fluent in French. I'm getting better at my English. If it's English, for example, right? So just bear with me, but maybe I've got a bit of an accent, or maybe some of the words I use are not as clear, or but just so I think if you're conscious about it, just put it out there. And it's not a formal job interview. People are genuine. At the end of the day, it's human connection, right? So I often say, like, even if yes, you do have to prepare and you do have to be professional, but it is about connecting with another human on a really basic, natural, simple kind of level. So you want to make sure that there's human connection there. And like I said, if you're self-conscious about it, put it out there. But if you find that there's going to be a strong barrier, or perhaps even, something that may be detrimental in terms of how you're engaging with the person, then I would suggest try and connect with somebody who you're going to be able to communicate with.
Absolutely. And maybe just practice in a safe space before the interview, but then also be completely open with them about your kind of self-doubt, if that's what I'm reading into Arlen's question here with regards to possible language barriers, etc. I mean, I had a very good friend who had a bad stutter. And, when I was with him and he was introducing himself to people, he would always say, I have a stutter. It doesn't bother me, and I don't want it to bother you. And, he would stutter with me, and I was partly used to him as well, as he was my friend. But, I was able to look past that and see him as a human, just communicating, and whether it's language or stuttering or any other issues that prevent that sort of fluent, confident communication. I think as humans, we all understand that we're all trying to make our way in the world, and we're happy to help each other and give each other a little bit of a safe space to make our best impression as far as possible. So Arlen there says, thank you very much. I'll follow your advice. Fantastic. Appreciate that. Okay, Natasha, let's just quickly talk about what you provide, your career services. I put the link there in the chat, and I'll maybe pop your website up onto the screen. But just, how can you help people? And people want to book a consultation with you and hop on your website. What can they expect from you?
So, I'm a career development practitioner. So I help clients at different stages of their career journey. So whether it's someone going like, I need to choose subjects for grade 10, or I'm investigating my options after school, there are career consultations available, as well as I incorporate psychometric assessments into some of the work that I do, where we're wanting to get a bit more clear on perhaps our interests or career fields. And then, I work with a lot of students in terms of interview preparation, personal branding, etc. So, you can hop onto my website and get in touch with me. And, it's either usually a career consultation, interview prep, etc. So but I generally work with students. I love working with students. But anyone involved at something that they're grappling with in terms of their career journey.
Tash, are you still running the Make a Difference offer?
I am.
Okay.
So so it's really just something that I offer students, full-time students. It's an initial 90-minute career consultation that's free of charge, and we can tackle kind of anything that you are grappling with at the moment. So that's available to students, and I encourage anyone who is interested to please take me up on the offer. It's something that I love doing, and yes, I'm still doing that, Pete.
Fantastic. Okay, and I think Louise Buerta has also made use of your services, so there's a strong recommendation there. from Louise. Thank you very much for that.
Thanks,
And then,
Louise.
Natasha's details are all up there on her website, and you can go through it there. And I think, Natasha, what was also very useful that I found on your website was just, you do actually provide some advice and guidance, in terms of how to manage your career, what the stages of it look like, and, how you've interpreted and helped your students and your clients over the years. So a very valuable website to get more information and book a consultation with Natasha. So thank you very much for all the effort that you put into your website there and the services that you provide, Natasha. Really do appreciate that very much. All right, so Natasha, just a last couple of questions then. Where do we find ourselves now in the rhythm of the year, right? I mean, so I think obviously everybody's very busy and cramming in what they can before we all go on holiday, etc. We've got a few more weeks left of the year. And I think we'll probably only have one more webinar next week. Like I said, it'll be Tracy, myself, and Salil talking about our new sales position interviews. But just give everybody a sense of, what we can expect. Next year now will be sort of 2 years since early 2020 and the onset of the pandemic, etc. What are you seeing in the job market, and what can people do at this time of the year to start thinking about, getting a good holiday, getting their mind right for January, February, and getting into 2022 at this stage from a career progression and a student success point of view?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head, Peter. People are tired. There's the sense of, I just want to wind down. I want to get through my exams. I want to make it through the last month of, whatever it is I'm doing before I go on leave, etc. But I find that this time of the year is really useful in terms of reflection, right? So I think it is just a good opportunity to slow down the pace. I probably say this on every webinar you invite me onto, is about slowing down the pace, taking some time to just reflect, unwind, reflect on some of the insights that you've gained through the different experiences that you've had. It's also a good time to do some personal introspection. So I think it's a good time to really just give yourself the time to rest, rejuvenate, reflect, and research. So that was a bit unintentional, but I guess the 4 R's. Rest, rejuvenate, reflect, and do some research in terms of your next steps come the new year.
Fantastic. Natasha, thank you. And just to add my own perspectives on that, what we're seeing in the job market is quite a fundamental shift. We talk about the Great Resignation. And, post-COVID, people are really evaluating not only the way they work, but who they work for and what type of work they're willing to do. So we can expect ongoing disruption, I think, in 2022. And my advice, and recommendation at this time of the year, in addition to what Natasha said, is when you have that time of reflection and you carve out some time to reflect and think about your career and your progress and your future, build your profile, build your brand, think about, what we've taught you over this year about whether that's on LinkedIn or the skills that you need to develop or the people that you need to add into your network, and then be very intentional about that. So I'm sure, Natasha, that, in terms of reflecting, you'd also advise people to have a journal and to make some notes. And it's in that time of reflection that you'll do your best thinking. And it's then in the new year when you can take those actions and you can be more intentional. But don't do that as a function of being very busy and time-starved. Do it as a function of what you've written down when you're reflecting and you've got the proper time and space to make those notes, and that you've hopefully then recorded them in your journal, so that when you come back in January, February, you can look back when you've been reflecting, look through those notes, and then take action on that basis, not on the demands and the disruptions that are going to keep coming at us, I think, in 2020. So yeah, Tracy says there, I love that, the 4 R's. There's a course, I think, there, Natasha, that we can teach on the 4 R's for this time of year. But Natasha, once again, thank you very much for joining us today. And I put a few links into the chat. I think the most important one is the Facebook group. So come and join that community and you'll get access to all the resources. I've put Tracy's website, I've put Natasha's website. We are all student success coaches. And quite frankly, if you come into the Facebook group and join us there, you can also help mentor other people. And Tracy does a lot of great work to get mentors into that group, because between Tracy, myself, and Natasha, we can't do it all. We want to create a community where people are helping each other and supporting each other. And like Natasha said earlier, possibly even providing points of research and information to prepare for interviews, in addition to just encouragement and advice and support, which we all need on our journeys. So lots of value from today. I think lots of resources that you can use and take action and take advantage of and make progress in your career and your student journeys. So Natasha, thank you very much. Have a super weekend. Any final words of wisdom and thought and advice before?
No, I think we're good, Peter. I mean, thank you again for the opportunity, and I just encourage people to get practicing your career conversations. The more career conversations you have with different people, the more comfortable you feel and the more fluent you are with engaging with professionals. So just get practicing, because it's a skill that you're going to use throughout your career. I think we've lost connection again. Some tech gremlins today. Not sure if you're still there, Peter, or if it's on my side or your side.